CIUT 89.5, Toronto.
The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program, and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of CIUT FM.
Hi, I'm Daniel Garber from CIUT Friday Morning.
Hi, this is Donna G. from The More the Merrier.
Hi, I'm Mark Tara from Rainbow Country, and together we are Team CIUT, bringing you coverage of TIFF 2020.
How are you? Good evening and welcome. It's the opening night.
Tonight, we thank you. I am so humbled and so grateful to be here this evening.
I'm extremely excited to be here. Thank you all for, holy shit, there's a lot of y'all.
I'm very proud to be here tonight, and I'm so grateful that you joined us.
I'll stop till you get enough.
Hello, Toronto!
Happy Halloween, Michael.
Can we touch on that, sis? Toronto, the best of them all.
That's it! It's amazing!
If you ever think about the best place to watch films, it's TIFF.
I want to thank Toronto because you have always honored, celebrated, exalted female directors.
The warmth and the love that you gave me is something I will never forget in my life.
It's so exciting to be here at Toronto in this gorgeous theater.
This is just like Christmas Day.
Thanks to you for coming.
This is truly a very special evening for me.
This is why we do what we do, you know?
I love this festival and it's an honor to be back.
Behind me is what we call society, what we see in there every day, and what we have on the screen. Let's keep on doing movies about us. We're making pictures about what's happening today in society. Thank you for coming.
Good morning, listeners, and thank you for tuning in to this special TIFF 2020 broadcast. This is Donna G, and joining me for the special coverage are Daniel Garber. You can hear his segment, Daniel Garber at the Movies, every Friday on the show, simply called CIUT Friday Morning. You can also find him at culturalmining.com. And he has the #1 LGBT podcast. It's Mark Tara, producer and host of the syndicated radio show Rainbow Country. And I'm Donna G, host of The More the Merrier, Wednesday mornings 1 a.m. to 2 a.m., film, theater, and arts at large coverage. Today, Daniel Garber and I will both have TIFF flashback interviews. Daniel will be flashing back to The Lighthouse. My flashback will be with director Myriam Joubert of the short film Brotherhood, which was nominated for an Academy Award in 2018. And Mark will have an interview from TIFF 2020 about No Ordinary Man, about the life of jazz musician Billy Tipton.
My name is Charles Officer, and I'm the writer and director of Invisible Essence, The Little Prince on CIUT 89.5 FM.
Film critic Daniel Garber. You can find him on CIUT Friday Morning with his segment, Daniel Garber at the Movies. Hi, Daniel.
Thanks, Donna. Robert Eggers is a celebrated young director known for his stunningly beautiful and very weird art house films. I talked with him at TIFF last year. The Lighthouse is only his second feature, but it won many awards and was nominated for an Oscar for Best Cinematography. It stars Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson and was shot in Nova Scotia in stunning black and white. Here's my interview with Robert Eggers. Come down, big blood red roses. Come down. Hi, this is Daniel Garber, the movies for culturalmining.com and CIUT 89.5 FM. In the 19th century, on a Atlantic island rock, an old salt and a young Jack Tar share threadbare lodgings. Their job, keep the lighthouse burning to warn all passing boats. The old man's there for the long haul, but the younger lad seems to be a temporary replacement. But as the isolation grows, they become increasingly unhinged as they try to keep their senses at the lighthouse. The Lighthouse is a new film about life on an isolated rock, as seen through the fantastical imaginations of the two men living there. It's written and directed by award-winning filmmaker Robert Eggers, his second feature after The Witch. The Lighthouse premiered at TIFF and is opening soon in Toronto, and I caught up with Robert Eggers at TIFF to tell us more about The Lighthouse. Hi, Robert. Thanks so much for meeting with me.
Thanks for having me.
So, I've only seen two of your films, but they clearly share certain traits based on historical writing, black and white, with a hint of the supernatural, or more than that in other ones. And tell me, is this a steady pattern, or is just how it's been so far?
I developed several things after The Witch that did not get ultimately greenlit. Right. And this one, which shares much of the same fabric as The Witch and is yet another New England folktale, was finally the thing on my slate that happened. All of those films were set in the past, and all of them had a certain darkness. But although they were much less in common than these two. Mm-hmm. I also just want to say quickly that I wrote this with my brother Max.
Oh, okay.
Like it wasn't. Okay. I was not the only author of this.
Sorry about that.
Like, no.
But you're the one who's here, so I'll talk about you.
Yeah.
How do these movies form? Did you come across these manuscripts and say this would be a great movie, or did you come up with the germ of an idea for a movie and said, I want to find some writing on this to use?
Yes. Well, talking about my brother, he had the idea of a ghost story in a lighthouse. Mm-hmm. That was a contemporary film that was very different from this. But I thought, ghost story in a lighthouse, that's such a good idea. I wish I'd come up with that. A couple months later, I said, how's that lighthouse movie coming? He says, that kind of sucks. And I asked him if I could take a crack at it. And because when he said ghost story in a lighthouse, I immediately thought of two lighthouse keepers in a cramped lighthouse keeper's cottage with a broken kerosene lamp and this dusty, crusty, rusty, musty, black and white movie. So when I had that image and the idea of what the atmosphere would be, I started reading different stories about lighthouse keepers until I found something that was a true story that was, again, not this story, but was something to riff off of. Mm-hmm. And then my brother and I, wrote this thing together, and we used research from
Herman Melville.
Well, from Melville and Stevenson and many other authors from the period, and there's readily available huge books about maritime slang and dialect. But there was a Maine-based author, Sarah Orne Jewett, who wrote in dialect, like phonetically. They're very sweet Maine tales, but she would interview farmers and retired sea captains and fishermen, and her work was one of the most fruitful places for us to dig from when creating the two different dialects of the different characters.
So it's Willem Dafoe is a voice sort of like a pirate, and Pattinson sounds more like a Boston South Side working class, maybe a Bowery boy, but without the where did the accents come from? How did that develop?
Rob's version of a down east accent comes from inland people and farmers,
right?
And Defoe's piratey accent does come from, believe it or not, like these old-time Mainers. I have a theory that there actually was a rhotic, as in a hard R, dialect in people in the maritime communities. Not the Maritimes as in like Canada, but in the maritime world of New England. I could be wrong about that, but when you read what Sarah Orne Jewett writes, it's hard to hear it with anything but that sort of semi-Bristolian piratey accent.
Okay.
And thankfully, Defoe can do something that to us sounds like a cartoony pirate and make it like believable.
Totally. Watching the movie, it seems very tightly scripted and storyboarded, but at the same time, when the two bodies interact, it felt almost improvisational. Was there any improvising?
No, there was no. I mean, there are certain things that in the moment just kind of happen,
right?
But it sort of controlled chaos,
right?
Robert Pattinson's lumberjack dance,
right?
We rehearsed it many times, but the level at which he brought that on set was something unexpected and new. But he knew where the camera was going to be, and knew that he would have, if he was going to improvise something, it would be based on like the camera placement.
Well, I know it was so cramped and claustrophobic that you can't just go wild. You can't go over the place. It has to be planned in advance.
Yeah.
Let's talk about sex.
Great.
Robert Pattinson character has this masturbatory tool of a whalebone, a mermaid. Mm-hmm. So talk about mermaids and sex in the movie.
Wow, no one's been so blunt before. I mean,
sorry.
No. I don't want to. I'm only cautious because I don't want to. I like the film to ask questions rather than to give answers. Right. So, but I think clearly the mermaid has a strong draw for Rob's character and while she is literally an object, literally like a figurine that he holds, like she finally has more power over him, though potentially like women's sexuality as power is a regressive trope, but it is certainly true to Robert Pattinson's 19th century lumberjack turned lighthouse keeper's experience.
Right. And
last question.
Finally, your movies are quintessential Americana, and yet both of them shot, I understand, in Canada. This one in Lighthouse in Nova Scotia, and I understand someone told me you went up to the forests of Canada for the first one, for The Witch.
Well, there's no good New England tax credits for filmmakers.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. That's good enough reason just for that.
Yeah. But honestly, I had an incredible time in Nova Scotia. Really, really, really loved the people there. They're like New Englanders, only they're actually friendly.
Right.
And the crew was fantastic. It was a great pleasure, and I enjoyed living in Halifax for the time that I was there. It was great.
Great. Thanks so much for talking with me.
Thanks.
This is Robert Eggers talking about his new film, The Lighthouse. This is Daniel Garber the Movies each Friday morning on CIUT 89.5 FM and on my website, culturalmining.com.
This is City Councillor Kristen Wong-Tam, and you're listening to CIUT 89.5 FM.
You can find him at marktara.com. He is Mark Tara, producer and host of the syndicated radio show Rainbow Country. It is also the #1 LGBT podcast. Hi, Mark.
Thanks, Donna. Coming up next, my interview with the filmmakers of the new trans documentary, No Ordinary Man. Aisling Chin Yi. Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I am well. Chase Joint, how are you?
I'm wonderful. Thanks so much for asking.
Excellent. The two of you are the co-creators, the co-directors of a new documentary, No Ordinary Man. But I always say this to my guests. First and foremost, welcome to the show, to have your voices, your stories be heard by the LGBT community and beyond. So thank you so much for that, first and foremost. So the two of you are co-directors of the new documentary, No Ordinary Man, that's playing at TIFF 2020. Congrats on getting the film done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How are you feeling about the film?
Excited. It's we've been working on this movie for a year and a half more with Amos Mack as well, and who is a co-writer on the film, and it's just really exciting to launch our baby into the world.
Aisling, let's stay with you here. When did you first hear about Billy Tipton? That's the subject of this new documentary.
I first heard about Billy Tipton from our producer, Sarah Spring of Parabola Films. She was interested in developing a project about him, and was showing me like different material with Billy Jr. and different and how Billy Jr. and his mother, Kitty Tipton, were being absolutely vilified, and Billy Tipton was being vilified on talk shows in the late 1980s and in the early 90s. And it was clear that his story was being, bastardized by the mainstream media. So it opened up a curiosity to learn more about him. Like, I've always been attracted to telling stories about people who aren't always having their stories told properly about them, or just not having their stories told at all. So that was kind of my first introduction to him, and then quickly started talking to Amos Mack, who had heard of Billy, before, and had known of him as a historical figure, a historical trans figure, and that's where the kind of idea and started to really grow and kind of crystallize.
And Chase Joint, for yourself, when did you first hear about Billy Tipton?
My answer to that question is in a lot of ways in chorus with so many of the participants in our documentary, which is to say, as a trans man myself, Billy Tipton has always existed in the ether. Billy Tipton has always been a fabulous haunting of a trans masculine person in history that, many have made a part of their own personal becoming, proof that people like us existed in decades prior. And then it was really through the invitation to join this project and the ongoing research that I began to understand Tipton's life and history in new ways.
So, Aisling, the documentary No Ordinary Man, what is this documentary about?
This documentary, it's about a lot of things, and we hope it's about a lot of things, but it's looking at the life of Billy Tipton, who was a trans-masculine jazz musician from Oklahoma City, who came up in the 40s and 50s playing jazz music in small clubs, lounges, and touring around like that, going on to radio stations and stuff like this. And he lived a very successful life. He was married 5 times. And then after he died, it was leaked and outed to the media that he was a transgender man. And after that, his story was changed to be told that he was, he was basically an ambitious woman who wanted to play jazz so much that they put on a pair of pants and a suit to follow that dream. And basically our film is trying to understand his story through an array of different trans people's lenses, to really explore who he was, and also where his story and its impact kind of sits today in a contemporary place. Chase is always better at answering that question than I am, though.
Oh, I think you hit so many of our speaking points. Yeah, I think, the legacy of Billy Tipton has been controlled by the mainstream media, and in particular, the talk show circuit. And so together with our creative team, we thought, what would happen to the story of Billy Tipton if we told it from a trans perspective and centered the voices of those who were most impacted by the telling of this particular life story.
So Chase, the documentary tells Billy Tipton's story through current day trans artists. Why did you guys decide to use this approach for the documentary?
One of the things that I think we continue to say about history is that it is not a stable story, that in fact the history we understand is just a repetition of stories by people who hold positions of power. And so what would we learn about Billy Tipton by inviting multiple people to the table to reflect on his significance? And because, our understanding of transness and gender nonconformity is also not stable, what it meant to be a trans person in the 1980s, for example, is very different from what it might mean to be a trans person in 2020. How could we create a much more kaleidoscopic portrait using Billy Tipton as our anchor? And so in some ways that returns to Ash's first reaction of, what's the movie about? The movie's about a lot of things. Precisely that yes, we made a film about Billy Tipton, but we also made a film about what's at stake when you attempt to tell a story about a marginalized person in history.
And Aisling, the documentary features Billy Tipton's story, Billy Tipton Jr. Talk to me about the process of getting Billy Tipton Jr. to be part of this documentary. Was it easy, difficult? How was that journey?
We were really lucky with Billy Jr. He has been, since his father's passing, he's been the most vocal in defending his father's legacy and defending his father's, his father of being a good father, a good husband, somebody who we loved, somebody who should be revered in so many ways. So when we approached him about telling this story in a documentary, and not just in kind of the news clips that he was getting victimized by in the late 80s and early 90s, he was incredibly trusting and generous. And we spent, I think, 4 days in Spokane with him, getting to know him, looking through all of his memorabilia of his father, and he was from the start just always embraced us with open arms and was incredibly generous with his father's music and all of these things. So it really was a wonderful journey with him, actually.
And the audio tapes that are part of the documentary, did those come through Billy Tipton Jr.?
Some of them did. There's some of his recordings. When we hear Billy's voice singing or talking, those were recordings that were done for live radio at one of his live performances or a couple of his live performances. So we got those from Billy Jr. But there was a biography that was written about Billy Tipton by this woman named Diane Middlebrook, who told his story in a very problematic way, but she did an incredible amount of research on his life, and did tons of interviews, really went around all over the US where Billy had been playing and touring around and living. And she had donated all of these interview recordings to Stanford University, which is where she taught. So we were able to, Amos Mack and I went to Stanford about a year and a half ago, and we got to dig through all of this research that was done by Middlebrook, and access to hours of these interviews.
So I'm calling this the talk show tour, so to speak. Billy Tipton's family, his wife and son Billy Tipton Jr., they were on essentially the talk show circuit on Oprah, on Sally Jessy Raphael, and others. Chase, I'm interested to know, they were doing these shows after Billy Tipton's passing. And a man that was so private in his life, did it surprise you that after his death, his family became so public with his story and everything that came out. Did that surprise you that such a private man in his passing, his family would become so public?
Well, I think one of the important things to recognize about his family in those contexts is that they are trying to do right by him in many ways. And that's one of the things that I find most compelling about Billy Jr., both historically in that talk show footage and in the contemporary moment as he continues to reflect on his father's life, is that his narrative is unchanging, that he had a father who he loved and that he spent important time with throughout his childhood. And we can watch the way Kitty, one of Billy's partners, says he was a man, he was a father, he was a loving person who deserved respect. You know, I think what we experience in that talk show montage, though, is the violence of the medium itself. So we understand that in this moment in the 80s and 90s, the presence of trans people on talk shows was a circus spectacle. And, you know, the questions of asked of trans and gender nonconforming people on these shows focused on essentially three things: genitals, pain, and deception. And so the family is being put through the same machine as some of the trans subjects. But I do think that they exist there in defense of their father and in defense of their partner. And even while, you know, they could be seen or interpreted by some as contributing to the spotlight.
But they had to go public to try to clear his name.
I think that's right. And I think that is, if we look back, I think that is what motivated some of their ongoing appearances.
So there's a term that's no longer in use, but I have to say personally, I love it. And the term is this: female husbands. And there's a great book out called Female Husbands by author Jen Mannion, and she's been a guest on the show. And essentially, the book recounts stories of women who lived their lives as men, even being married to other women, dating back to the 1700s. Fast forward to Billy Tipton and his story in the 40s and the 50s. Aisling, I'm interested to know, did you guys get any insight while doing this documentary as to why Billy Tipton did what he did? How he got that strength to do what he did? Because we're talking about the 40s, the 50s. There weren't role models back then of people really, truly living their truths.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the thing, that we don't have any diaries from Billy. We don't have anything that says, oh, this is exactly what he was thinking to answer the questions that we're asking in the film. So that's why we wanted to not make something that said just told one story or one way that we imagine he, you know, why he lived his life in the way that he lived his life, apart from the fact that he lived it, you know, very honestly and authentically as a man, and the people, everyone who loved and knew him knew he was a man, and that's the record we have to go off of, you know. So it's so in that, it's like, that's why we wanted to tell it from this, like Chase says, like this kaleidoscope of experiences, because there isn't, you know, we can't point at like, well, this is his final testimonial about all the things he's ever thought, or the truths he's ever wanted to live. But we hope that in this film that we're able to restore, you know, the respect that the people that loved him had for him, and that people who knew him as this very like loving and giving person, who was also very talented as a musician, and also was so many other things, because our lives are more complex than just one motivation to do any one thing.
And I think it really speaks to the human spirit and the strength of the human spirit, right? Back in the 40s and the 50s, the strength that he would have to do what he did.
And I think one of the things that's interesting, even if you bring up the book Female Husbands, is the subtitle of that book is a trans history, right? And what I love about that is this sort of expansiveness of what's possible under the umbrella term of trans. And as we were journeying with our various interview subjects, the question was never, was Billy Tipton a trans person? Can we lock this into place? And can we get to the truth of his potential identificatory past, right? It was more what's at stake in asking these questions, or what does it mean to look back from our contemporary moment and think, you know, is there someone here that I can find meaning with, right? Enduring meaning. And I think that there's a kind of slipperiness there that's very productive. I love the moment in the film where Thomas Page McBee says, you know, it's important that we can look back, but we might be wrong. Or, you know, when Amos Mack says, I don't think Billy was thinking in the way we're thinking now. And all of these moments being okay to have trans men reflecting on their history, even if it is speculative.
How would I summarize the story of Billy Tipton? He was a trans-masculine jazz musician. Pretty simple.
The first phrase that always comes to my mind is the gentleman's gentleman. You know, just the consummate professional and the gentleman's gentleman.
The first time that I learned about Billy Tipton was probably 2003 or 2004. Just before I started my medical transition, I was doing a ton of research at that point. And so I wanted to learn about my ancestors essentially that came before me.
In a way, Billy has been with me in sort of the background before my transition, and thinking about him again from the place of being a trans man was very interesting for me, because I think I had held him, you know, in just a sort of general context of queerness prior to that.
And Chase, what's the overall, where's this film heading once it's done the festival circuit, that sort of thing?
Well, we have an exciting festival tour that continues to gain momentum, many of which we are not allowed to announce quite yet, but we're feeling very, very excited about its ongoing showcases. And, you know, our goal is to get the project in the living rooms and on the screens and in front of the eyes of as many people as possible. And so I don't know what the concluding sentence to that is, but we're not going to stop. You know, to the point about funding, we live in a culture and a climate where, you know, people say films about trans content are hard to sell, and we as a team just believe that that's a wholly unacceptable statement, and we will not be kept down.
I love that. We will not be kept down. Powerful words. Aisling Chin Yi, I hope I didn't mess up your name throughout this interview.
Not at all. You said it perfectly.
and Chase joined. I hope I said your name correctly.
You did indeed.
Thank you both for being on the show, and thank you for seeing the documentary. Well done, powerful, moving, well done to both of you and to everyone involved.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Don't forget, for virtual tickets for No Ordinary Man, TIFF.net.
Hi, I'm Mayor John Tory, and you're listening to CIUT 89.5 FM. I'm old enough to remember when they called it U of T Radio.
This is Donna G. with a TIFF flashback. When I interviewed Myriam Joubert in 2018, neither of us realized that she would then go on to win the Toronto International Film Festival Shortcuts Award for Best Canadian Short Film for Brotherhood. When she won, I was watching the awards in my living room, and I jumped when her name was called. And later, when Brotherhood was nominated for an Academy Award in 2019, I was ecstatic. And I reached out to her and I congratulated her. And of course, she was very excited. That is definitely one of those TIFF moments that will stay with me. A, because her film is absolutely beautiful. And B, because Myriam is not only a wonderful filmmaker, she is a wonderful person, so nice and genuine. And I was happy to see her success. When filmmakers make a film, especially a short, they never know what will happen. It's a project usually done from the heart. And so I want to share with you an excerpt from that original interview that I did with Myriam Joubert. And it's thanks to the Toronto International Film Festival that we linked. So with the festival coming up, why not dip into the past? And maybe this will encourage you to go out and see some, not go out, but virtually invest in seeing some of the short films that are screening at this year's festival in the 5 Shortcuts programs. You never know what might happen. Here now is my interview with Myriam Joubert about Brotherhood. One of the things that you do well is framing, and I really noticed it in Brotherhood. Were you conscious of that? Is that how you work, by frames? Like framing people, framing images? Is that part of your repertoire?
I think Vincent, the cinematographer, and I have been working together since film school, so it's been almost 6 years now, and we've kind of figured out a really great way of collaborating. But I'm very involved in the framing because, like I mentioned, visuals, I'm very drawn to it. Mm-hmm. And in the case of Brotherhood, from the very beginning, my instinct was to really focus, the cast. I worked hard on the casting of the film, and I knew that the faces of my characters were really interesting. So I really wanted to highlight all the details in their faces. So their freckles, the weathering. I
want to get into that later. Why don't we set the stage for Brotherhood by telling the audience what Brotherhood is about?
So Brotherhood takes place in the north of Tunisia in a very rural area, and it explores a family story dealing with a very complex reunion. The eldest son of the family, Malik, returns home from Syria with a mysterious Syrian wife, and basically the film explores how the different characters in the film react to it. The family members, each of them has a different reaction to Malik's return, and in the essence, it's a story about a father and son and how the past wounds and misunderstandings leads to tragic results.
Is it the Tunisian title? Ikhwan? How do I pronounce that? Ikhwan. Does that actually translate to Brotherhood, or what is that meaning?
It translates to Brotherhood, but it has the connotation, the more religious connotation of Brotherhood, because the word Brotherhood in Islam, I'm sure people have heard like the Islamic Brotherhood, or, I wanted to use the word Brotherhood that had that religious connotation so that it could better, translate to the narrative of the film.
Yes, I was very interested in. I keep saying interested, but I loved your film.
No problem.
Because it took me to areas I'd never been before, and in Brotherhood, you're talking about political issues that I hear peripherally about on the news, but I'm not really tuned in to the Tunisian-Syrian tension. Can you speak a little bit more about that? Because that is, the impact on the family.
Yeah, I mean, one of the more baffling facts that I learned was that Tunisian foreign fighters make up the largest percentage of foreign fighters to ISIS, which this includes men and women, because a lot of young women have also gone to Syria to marry fighters or, be sexual women to the fighters. And that was always a strange fact to me because, Tunisians, we pride ourselves on being well educated, more out of the Arab world, more liberal, more open-minded, and yet we have this issue where we have a lot of Tunisian men going to join ISIS. So that was a point of inspiration for the film, is to explore, how this impacts Tunisian families, specifically one Tunisian family.
And this is a family that looks like no other I see very often on film. The brother, you're talking about brotherhood and also brothers, because there are 3 brothers in the film. And I love their freckles. It was so unexpected. Where did you find them?
Yeah. I mean, this is the crazy story of the film, actually. Every time I tell this story, everyone gets excited. But basically 2 years ago, I was driving in the north of Tunisia. And on the side of the road, I met the 2 eldest brothers. And I stopped to take their photo because, once you see the film, you realize that these boys have really amazing faces. They have red hair and freckles, which is very unique to Tunisia. You don't see that a lot in Tunisia, what I mean. And they actually told me no, that I couldn't take their photo, so I drove away. But I couldn't get them out of my mind because there was something, it just hit me. My instinct told me there was something special. So I wrote the script to the film, and I told Vincent, my cinematographer, that I wanted to go look for them. So him and I went back last summer, and we basically had a day to find them. We didn't know where they were exactly. We didn't know their names, but we managed by the end of the day to find them and to convince them to act in the film. And the other nice surprise was we realized that they had a younger brother, Ryan, who was also a redhead with freckles. So I added him in the script as well.
Little Ryan.
Yeah. Yeah, little Ryan.
So what did their family think about, you, this filmmaker, coming in and wanting to make a short film starring their children?
Yeah, that was also a big dilemma. I actually, had to, initially I told the boys, I'll be back in 6 months, take your time to think about whether you want to do this or not. But when I returned in the winter for the shoot, I had to spend 2 weeks trying to convince their father to let me have permission. Because he, when I talk about, it's a very rural area, there's no running water. They have televisions, but, film industry seems extremely far away. So he was nervous. He was like, are you going to steal my kids? Are you taking them to America? What are you doing? And I joked with him. I told him, no, actually, I'm going to come live with you, and you're going to have to adopt me in some sense, So we ended up going to the police station. We showed, the officers our papers, and they said we were legitimate, so he finally gave his blessing. But it took a while to convince him, that's for sure.
They do a wonderful job, considering they're non-actors.
Yeah, that's what was incredible, was actually, I had to wait until I got their father's permission to actually do any tests with them, any screen tests with them. So I didn't know if they were going to be comfortable in front of the camera. But my instinct told me that, I don't know, I never questioned it. And it was pretty amazing because we didn't once the father said yes, we didn't have that much time before the film to do the shoot. They immediately were comfortable in front of the camera, which was really impressive. And they each had like their own style of acting, which is also really crazy.
I thought these kids are so natural. I didn't know that they really were natural.
Yeah, they're not, but they are acting because, I mean, yes, they live in the north, they live in these conditions, but they've never experienced a brother coming home from Syria. Mm-hmm. So in some regards, they really had to, they had to act. It wasn't a docu-fiction. It was very much like a narrative setup.
Yeah, especially because the brother comes home with a woman who's wearing a niqab, and the whole tension that is created in the family because of that.
Yeah.
So tell me about the adult actors who play the mother and father in the film.
Yeah, so Salha Nasrawi plays the character of the mother, and Mohammed Grayat plays the character of the father. And they're both professional Tunisian actors. Salha has a lot of experience in theater, and Mohammed actually is very well known on television. And again, I never did auditions with them. I saw their photographs and I immediately connected to their faces, so I cast them. And the funny thing about Mohammed is I didn't realize how well known he was until we were filming, and all these shepherds would come up to him and shake his hand and tell him, "We saw you last night on TV." So that's when Vincent and I realized he's kind of like the Robert De Niro of Tunisia.
Wow. Wow. So everything came into place with this film.
It was pretty crazy, honestly. But I mean, I think it's a testament to, what I learned on the film, it's a testament to following your instincts and having faith. Mm-hmm. That was the big life lesson I took out of the project. But, it was amazing in that sense. I definitely learned a lot about life through this project.
It's a wonderfully told script, and I love how it evolves. And I love the images, again, that you create. And you work really well with Vincent Gonville. Gonville, is that how he pronounces it? Yeah.
Yeah.
You two work really well together. Now, the film is 25 minutes. And with me, I like my short films short. So when I saw that this was 25 minutes, I thought, oh, no, it's going to feel really long. And but it doesn't. It's like that and Godspeeds and Revolutions. You time really well, you edit really well, and your movies go past when you're so engrossed you don't realize that the time is passing. And by the end of Brotherhood, I'm like, no.
Well, that's a beautiful compliment, Donna. Thank you.
It's a beautiful film. The stubborn dad, the son who's come back home, trying to reestablish himself with family and reconnect with his brothers whom he loves. And I love the scenes by the water where they're just playing and, being boys, and the mother engaging the young woman who is new to the house, and the stubbornness of the father. All of the family things that happen everywhere in the world, but so specific to this family and to Tunisia. And that's why I keep using the word interesting with your film, because it's so refreshing. And I just want to thank you so much, Mariam, for making this film.
Thank you. Oh, that's so nice of you. Thank you. Yeah, that's exactly what I hope to achieve with this film, is just to show how universal family is, no matter where you are.
Yeah.
And that's what I hope to convey with this film, that a Tunisian family is very much like an American family or a Canadian family. And, you know, a Canadian family who has the same thing happen to them will probably react in a very similar way.
Right. Yeah.
So that was my hope with this film.
That was a TIFF flashback moment with Academy Award nominated director Myriam Joubert. TIFF has 2 remaining short cuts programs that you can check out. Monday, September the 14th, 6 p.m., films from Israel, Canada, Lebanon, and the UK. Of particular interest to me is the South Asian father-son weightlifters short called Strong Son. In Program 5 on Tuesday, September 15th at 6 p.m., there is Sucker and Sinking Ships, 2 films that I've screened and can recommend. And in that section, Canada, Belgium, Portugal, and the U.S. are both represented. You never know which one of these remaining shortcuts programs will feature an Academy-nominated or winning short film. www.tiff.net for all the information and your virtual tickets.
Hi, this is Carol Pope on CIUT 89.5 FM.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening. This is Daniel Garber, the movies on culturalmining.com and CIUT 89.5 FM and on Twitter at Cultural Mining.
Hi, this is Donna G from The More the Merrier. Come join my Night Owls and Early Birds Wednesday mornings, 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. And happy tiffing!
I'm Mark Tara from the syndicated radio show and #1 LGBT podcast, Rainbow Country, which can be heard right here on CIUT Tuesdays, 11 p.m. Don't forget, we will be back on Tuesday, 11 a.m. and Wednesday at 2 p.m.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? Good evening and welcome. It's the opening night.
Tonight, we thank you. I am so humble and so grateful to be here this evening.
I'm extremely excited to be here. Thank you all for holy shit, there's a lot of y'all.
I'm very proud to be here tonight, and I'm so grateful that you joined us.
I'll stop till you get enough.
Hello, Toronto.
Happy Halloween, Michael.
Can you touch that, sis? Toronto, the best of them all.
If you ever think about the best place to watch films, it's TIFF.
I want to thank Toronto because you have always honored, celebrated, exalted female directors.
The warmth and the love that you gave me is something I will never forget in my life.
It's so exciting to be here at Toronto in this gorgeous theater.
This feels like Christmas Day. Thanks to you for coming.
This is truly a very special evening for me.
This is why we do what we do, you know?
I love this festival and it's an honor to be back.
Behind me is what we call society, what we see in there every day, and what we have on the screen. Let's keep on doing movies about us. We're making pictures about what's happening today in society. Thank you for coming!
My name is Charles Officer, and I'm the writer and director of Invisible Essence, The Little Prince on CIUT 89.5 FM.
Taking us out, trans jazz musician Billy Tipton.